Tashidilek. This is part of an interview series with candidates running for 2021 Chithue elections. We are focused on creating a platform for new faces from diverse backgrounds in order for our viewers to also engage in the discussions we are about to have. I'm Choekyi Lhamo, and here with us today we have Utsang Chithue, Dr. Sonam Topgela, and Tenzin. Utsang Chithue is the Digital Security Program Director at the Tibet Action Institute. He recently made it to the Wired UK 2021 Smart List of Innovators. Dr. Sonam Topgela has a PhD degree in political science from the Central University of Gujarat and is currently working as a researcher at one of the prominent rights group, Tibet Watch Research Center, based in Dharamshala. Kesang is the co-founder of Lhamo, an organization that works towards creating awareness about gender inequality in the Tibetan community and has successfully established a platform for dialogue on these issues. We welcome you all. Thank you for accepting our request for this interview. We'll start with individual questions. We'll start with you.
All right, sure.
Yeah. Utsang, as a digital expert who specializes in Chinese cyber attack and who also works as an activist in this field, what do you think you can bring to the table if elected?
All right. Thank you, Choekyi. So I think as somebody who has worked in the community for more than a decade, I bring a different experience, especially with working with different communicators, those Tibetans who actually communicate with Tibetans inside Tibet and who are the conduits for a lot of the information of human rights abuses that's happening inside Tibet. And I think that's a group of people that I work with, and I understand their needs and concerns. As part of my work, I've also worked with a lot of different civil society organizations, so different NGOs and most of them. So working with them has actually allowed me to see what they do and how they do that, and how digital security is an important aspect of their needs, whether it's protecting themselves from Chinese espionage or cyber attacks. So I think that's part of it. And on another side is the fact that as somebody who also is some of a technologist, I believe in technology in the sense like technology can be used for good as well as evil. However, being from a technology background, I think I bring something different to the Tibetan Parliament. So one of the things might be like we are talking about stopping the rise of China. And if you look at the rise of China and what's happening around the world, it's the rise of Chinese 5G, it's the rise of microchips, it's the rise of semiconductors. And how do we combat that? So I think from a Tibetan Parliament perspective, we need a strategy on how we can combat China in this age of technology. And I think I bring a unique perspective in that, not only because of the fact that I understand that, but I'm also part of a global internet freedom community which actually works on these issues. So I feel that there might be other spaces where I can find collaborators that we can collaborate with and actually be able to make some positive change in the Tibetan freedom struggle.
Sure. Thank you. Right. So, Sonam Topgela, to you, I would ask, as your background as a researcher and an academic, what will be the key issues you'll put forth in the House if elected?
The purpose of standing for this, contesting for this election is more to bring new ways to see and promote the debate. I came from a marginalized community, in the sense I came from nomadic background, from marginal community. And then Parliament is more about, because it talks about democracy. Democracy means people's rule, and there is a diversity, the plurality of the diverse peoples, and the governing of that. It always it does matter to have the diverse people in the Parliament, to have their own diverse voice that can be that matters in the deciding, in the discussion, in making of the law or whatever it comes in the Parliament. It's about like having that kind of background, and I can really promote to have new ways to understand. It's always boring to see the same people like in this, for a long time in the Parliament and talking about the same issue in the way that's so like naive, sometimes naive, sometimes similar for last many years. I think there's need of change. That's why like new people are coming. It's interesting in the sense they will have a different understanding of the whole issue, and it will not be decided by one group of people from same political class or social class. Like we will be having new people from diverse background, diverse like women representation. There will be different people like me from a very marginalized community. So I think And it's more about how we are going to, our democracy is very young, and how we are going to go forward with with that. And it's all about this,
Yeah, thank you. Kisangla, as a feminist and the co-founder of Lhamo, you'll be working towards, and I quote, a safer, healthier and gender equal world. Do you feel there has been a vacuum or an underrepresentation of these issues in the Tibetan Parliament in exile?
I would say definitely, because I think in the last few years, a lot of the work that I do and my own personality has been mostly put forward as being a feminist foremost, right? But for me, I don't think that there is any divide in my identity as a political refugee, a Tibetan political refugee, right? And as a feminist, I don't see any divide in these two. I am a Tibetan woman. I cannot be just a Tibetan and just a woman. So for me, I think these issues, a lot of people feel that gender issues are only concerning women. And when we talk about gender justice in our community, people think that we are talking about something that's so secondary, or not even secondary, something that's that could be thought of, or that could be considered after we win our political struggle, right? For me, I don't think that is the right way to go about it at all, because how do we, what is the movement made of? What is the community made of? It is made by individual lives, individual people, right? And during my work in the last few years, I've had the immense privilege of traveling to so many different Tibetan settlements, talking to Tibetans of all ages, from school children to parents to the oldest of the Tibetans that are all over India and Nepal, right? And I've come to realize that if during our struggle, we have been continuing our struggle for the last 60 years, and while we continue to struggle for a future that we all want, a free from colonial occupation of China, a free Tibet, right? That is what we want to see in the future. But we are currently living our lives right now. There are so many thousands of people who continue to live their lives out on the daily in exile, right? How do we work towards our future while still making sure that we take care of our present too? Because if we don't take care of our present, there is no future for us. So feminism and gender justice issues in the community, it is just a representation of the kind of community that we want to build, a society without violence. If we tomorrow we see a free Tibet, what is that vision of Tibet? For me, these two go hand in hand. We have to create a safer, healthier, non-violent community here, so that, because here is all that we have control over, right? And maybe through our efforts in the present, we can create a future Tibet that we want to see, that we would all love to be in.
Thank you, Kisangla. My next round of questions to all of you is about the Tibetan Parliament in exile. Many feel that the Tibetan Parliament in exile needs fundamental changes and restructuring to move ahead with changing circumstances. I'll take Sonam Topgela's views on this. What do you think are some of the changes needed in this?
Yes. You see, and 30 years back, Daunu wrote an article on Tibetan democracy. If we reflect this article now, if we look back, there's a fundamental argument which he says Tibetan democracy, if it is to be only valid and real, there's need of not only promoting facades of democracy, but also the value, democratic value, and institutions should be democratized. And in the one way he talks about is the whole leadership is engaged in a kind of demagogue, or populist kind of argument or leadership provides that kind of, which actually leads people in the wrong way, in the sense that they use the religious and symbolic important symbol to manipulate the people. And we have last 10 years or 20 years, you see that you see that like how people are engaged with it, and it's always top down. Like the influence of the leadership that's like not only like in the parliament but outside religion, and it's becoming like what like BJPs are doing in India. You have people like in the parliament, like, and there should be kind of diversity of opinion and informed kind of debate, and they promote kind of subservient. I don't know, it's not the right word, but kind of politics of loyalty. Like they profess, okay, I'm most loyal person, I should be, and then in that way they use the people, like, and instead of like engaging in a kind of debate or any like, let's do, if we say if there's some important like laws are to be made, and there should be kind of discussion from, if there's, okay, let's take example, if there are one new laws that like that came like in the parliament to discuss, suppose it is on a women, like then there is all, suppose it is on a women's like gender issue, and right now we have majority of men like deciding, like, so that's what I'm saying, like, we have kind of same class of and same kind of leadership that profess, like they care more about the people who are above them or the authority, and then they don't engage in the they don't engage with the issues in more like independent and critical, and that actually can bring changes to the people, like, and bring more just society, and actually that is what I'm saying, like we need, what we see is like, if we look back 30 years now, and now we are in the same, like although there are new people who came, it also was like new wine in, and all wine in new bottle, like they do same thing, and thing is actually we not only need new people but new mindset, new perspective that can bring really, and that is, I think, like if we look at the whole debate, it's more like kind of bigotry sometimes and it's not like, okay, we have left the issue that's concerned, like maybe social justice, maybe whole political issue are left out, like, and in parliament the people are divided over like who are more true to like the what, like His Holiness or region or whatever. So
it's a top-down approach, you're saying.
Top-down approach. There's no critical engagement with the issue that concern people, and it's like people are underrepresented. Like there's not much matters important. Peoples are being consulted, like, and debated,
Sure. Okay, let's get your thoughts on that, Kesang.
Yeah, I would agree with Snamtop Gila on the fact that our parliament definitely needs to see more diversity in terms of not just like age group, but like different ideologies and different thoughts, and in terms of I think like what he talked about, like people from different backgrounds, right? Like I think this like from what I have personally observed, and I think like many people would also like connect to this, a lot of like the youth have sort of like been feeling a disconnect from what is happening here in Dharamsala, and I think like even when the parliament sessions are going on, like I honestly hardly see like any of the people around me, like who are like young, right, like who are around my age group. I don't see a lot of people paying attention to what's going on in the parliament, and that is actually, I think, like really dangerous for us as political refugees, because what happens in our parliament, what happens like whether you talk about like our tsadun, like our political struggle, right, like whether you talk on that level, or whether like you talk about like more of like the social issues, right, that are raised in the parliament, like the members of parliament are our representatives. So they need to reflect, like, what the public feels. And if a huge section of the population, the youth, right, like, if they are feeling a little bit of, like, a disconnect with what's happening here, and like, I think, like, we definitely need to at least consider why is there a disconnect? Like, what can we do to change that, right? And, like, one of the reasons that I'm also, like, I also took the decision to run was because, like, I can't just keep saying that, like, okay, I want to see changes, and, like, this is not happening, that is not happening. I can't just keep saying that, like, I need to take action. Like, if I feel that something needs to be changed, like, okay, how do I, like, take action, like, take that responsibility upon myself, and, like, try to, like, create that change, right? And another thing I think is, like, I think we need to have sort of a re-energizing, sort of like a reawakening of this, like, political fire. I think all Tibetans have that, this fire in our bellies to, go for a protest, or, like, even if, like, a lot of the things happening nowadays, like, it's on the, like, digital, the arena, right? Like, the things on social media, like propaganda machines and all of that. So, like, Tibetans are so quick to rise up to, like, any challenge when it comes to, our political struggle, and, like, but I don't think we see that really reflected in the upper decision-making arenas. So, like, I think I would like to see a change in that too, like, where we become a little more politically active. Like, where people are, like, especially the youth, right? Like, where we are encouraged to actually be politically active. Because I think that is the one major thing that has, like, defined us as, like, people who are protesting against the Chinese government, like, people who have been colonized and exiled by the Chinese state, right? Like, this thing of us being really, really politically active has defined us in our last 60 years. And we cannot lose that, I think.
I'll get back to you on the youth question. Thank you. What are your thoughts on this matter?
So, yeah, I guess I do agree with certain aspects of what Kyesan and both ST have said. However, I do disagree on certain aspects of it. So let me just kind of, like, state that first. And so the question was about what structural change do you want to see in the Exile Parliament system? So I think we started talking about what could be done. I think we were not talking about the structure, and I think that's something that we need to talk about. But before I go into that, let me just kind of, like, talk about is an issue with the Tibetan Parliament, the engagement of the youth. I think there is an engagement of the youth. There's an issue there. However, I think we also have to understand in the 2016 election, 53% of the members were actually new. So that does raise a question on, does new always get better? Like, does it mean that new representation of new people in the parliament, does it change the parliament? Did it change? Because I think ST actually said it pretty kind of, like, well, in saying, like, it's an old wine in a new bottle. So I think that was the question there. So does that mean that we do need a structural change in this in the structure of how we elect members? So I think maybe there is a question there, because I think one example I just want to raise is, so a Tibetan living in Australia has one word. A monk living in India has 12 words. We usually say that, like, a monk and a layperson have, somebody has one word and somebody has 2 words. I don't think that's the case. If, for example, let me see, I'm running from Utsang, right? So I have 10 words. So I can vote for 10 people, but the same Tibetan living abroad can only vote for 1 or 2 people. That itself is a structural issue that we need to rectify. And how does that get rectified? I think it's a very is a hard question, because the structure that we have right now is a representation of the Tibetans inside Tibet, and I don't think we can change that entirely, because in entirety I don't think we can change that. Because if you think about how the exiled democracy was formed in 1959, I think it was about representation of Tibetans inside Tibet, and our democracy what we are trying to do in Exile is represent Tibetans inside Tibet. So I think we do need that structure that we have right now. However, how can we better represent Tibetans? How does, because normally when we talk about democracy, we always talk about one person, one vote. How do we change that? How do we reconcile with the fact that we have to represent Tibetans inside Tibet? At the same time, there has to be representation in the diaspora, as well as accountability. So I think we do need to rethink that. And I don't have a solution. I'm not saying that I have a solution, but I think we need to discuss that and how can we find a solution. So I think that's something that we need to work towards.
Can I add?
Yeah, sure.
And actually, like this is the question, the bringing changes in the political structure, or this is all has to happen from the parliament. One thing, structural changes. Yes. So it's a matter of collective. Like it's not going to have. If I get elected and then I'm going to, like the structural problem he talks about. The majority is actually the monks and the people, religious sect. They have 10 seats and they can vote from other. They're double privilege. They vote from Choekyi, and then they are the most social. If we talk about social class, they are the most historically privileged social class, tiny majority, and has dominant. Like throughout the not only parliament, throughout culture and everything. So really, we need structural changes, right? And for this, if it were to happen, and we need more. It's not. I'm not saying we don't need religion, because it's there's a need of secularization, like the separation of state and church. I mean, there's a need of that, and it's not going to happen. I know that, because you look in the parliament, there's a, if there's this there's the terms and conditions says if we need change, there should be 2/3 majority. In parliament we have one majority, one third, which are actually represent one group of people. So that they're not going to allow that to happen, and it's difficult. So I don't know how we are going to, if we were to talk about this kind of changes, if we are in need of bring these changes, and I don't know how we are going to put, but collective, I'm talking about how we, and the parliament is all about bringing the diverse views and representation, and then discussing and bringing all the perspective, and not to and that's I forgot to add in the first comment, because down all the parliamentarian has become yes men, co-opted by the higher authority or the people who are that has been till now. That's why we need change, not in the sense we get new people, but the way people see the issue, and it should be transcend the narrow regional or sectarian issue. It should bring that kind of our own universality of common, share identity, or share absence of our not having state, freedom, lots of things.
No, I think just to kind of add on what you're saying, right? I think that it's not a possibility. I think it's something that I think we are being too pessimistic, because if I know that there are challenges. However, if you look at Exile, the Tibetan Parliament system, right? First and foremost, when it first started, what was the representation, right? The women representation wasn't there. That was changed. Right? However, at the same time, PiiE wasn't part of the original representation. That was changed. So I think there is changes that's happening. We didn't have Europe or the Australasia. We had to change that. So I think there are changes that can happen. However, as you were saying, it has to be a collective, and to get a collective, you have to get consensus. And there are going to be challenges. I think it is an issue. However, I think a lot of the common people, right, common Tibetans, are seeing that this is a challenge, and people are people do want to see some change. So I think if it does come from the public, right, the parliament has to listen in some ways, whether they want to or not. And I see that there is a possibility. However, I do understand there are structural issues and structural challenges. But I think I do see possibilities. I'm not saying that it's going to be an easy road.
I think that's one thing that while I understand that we're talking about the structural the basic structure of the parliament itself, right, and how it operates. I am actually a little more concerned about how do we if we see that changes from within might be a little hard, like then as a democracy, like, I think I'm a little more concerned about, like, the public realizing that, like, they actually have the power to, like, demand that change if the public actually wants it, right? So the political kind of consciousness that I was talking about, like, it's not just for our tabzu is not actually, like, something that's completely separate from, like, the lives that we are living right now. I said that because all of these, like, structures that have been in place, which are difficult to, like, change, like, even as a member of parliament, you can't do anything on your own, right? You need consensus from the other members of parliament. So, like, when the public starts taking that, I think, responsibility and, like, starts recognizing that, like, in a democratic society, like, you as a, like, member of the public have that responsibility and that privilege of demanding that your representatives actually go and represent, like, within the halls of the parliament, like, your desires, your vision of the kind of community that you want to see, the kind of, like, exile society that you want to build, and, like, the future of the Tibetan political movement that you want to see. Like, I think, like, it has to come from the public.
This is, can I add? It's short.
Yeah, we're short in time.
It's short,
Just,
cut it under the, like, if we talk about, like, how that political consciousness, it's not that our people are not having political consciousness. As I told earlier, our leadership are engaged in a demagogic manipulation, like how they, just how BJP use nationalism to, promote their agenda, like party-centric, like, which does, and that people get manipulated. In our context, like, all leaders are engaged in using, symbolic, religious symbol to, manipulate, like, if you look at last 10 years, you can see it.
yeah. Thank you, guys. My next question, Kesang, you touched upon it a little back. There's a growing view among the Tibetan constituents, especially the youth, that lawmakers need credibility outside the house with regards to the work they do as an MP, and many serving MPs fall short of that assessment. Do you feel the same?
Credibility in terms of what?
Outside the house, working in different NGOs, having their own credibility proved,
Right,
not just
yeah.
in the house, just not about 2 sessions a year.
Right.
So what about it?
I would say that, like, the kind of disillusionment that the younger, like, you're talking about a specific, like, example, right? Like, I feel that it could possibly be because, like, that is the reality, right? Like, how many members of parliament are actually involved in, like, I think as a youngster myself, like, I would be able to respect someone if they actually either, like, have always had a history of, like, service to the community, or, like, even in their own profession, like, like excelling in that profession, like, for me, I want to see people in the parliament who inspire me to excel in my own field, who inspire me to, like, serve my community. And, like, the disillusionment of the youth, like, I think that is completely valid, because we know that, like, members of parliament go for korku in, like, settlements, right? Like, they go for, like, settlement tours where, like, they interact with the public and everything. Like, I don't think that's enough at all. Like, when I was working in the Central Tibetan Administration, like, when I was working in CTA, like, I was just a project officer, like, I had, like, no power at all. Like, I was just, like, handling a few projects, right? When I went to, like, different settlements for a specific, like, project, people would actually come up to me and say that, like, oh, you are, you're working with the CTA, like, shungi leje re, and then, like, I'm facing this problem, like, our Shija is facing this problem and that problem. And I actually, like, it is the job of members of parliament and, like, the representatives of the people to make that first move to, like, go to the public and take that responsibility to say that, like, you are the ones who have elected me, and, like, I am responsible for you. So, like, what can I do for you? Like, I think it really falls on the members of parliament, right? So in terms of credibility, I would say that, like, not just in their own, like, personal, professional lives, but also as an MP, like, we definitely want to see members of parliament do more as a public, yeah.
Great. Lobsang.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. This is just to, among the youth constituents, the lawmakers, many feel that lawmakers need more credibility outside the house.
Okay.
And with regards to the work they do as an MP, and that they fall short of that assessment. What are your thoughts? Do you think, do they fall short?
I think this is more nuanced. I think, like, just saying they're falling short, I think is being a bit unfair to the members of parliament who are actually in the parliament right now, because I think, as I was saying, structurally, I think there's a challenge. So how many members of parliament are actually paid members of parliament? There's only 10. The rest actually have to make their own living. Some may be working with different organizations, some are not. If they do want to do that work, is there a budget that they can do that? Is there a budget for their travel? I think those are valid questions that we need to ask. How do you make sure that your parliamentarians are more accountable? I think it's also about how do you make sure that they actually have the resources to do what they need to do? And I think that is something that's lacking. At the same time, I think there are issues in terms of credibility, especially with the youth, because I think, as others have mentioned, I think is the issues that are raised in the parliament sometimes, are they actually reflective of the community? Are they actually reflective of the youth? A lot of times I don't think it is. A lot of times the issues tend to be more personal. It tends to be focused on individual silos, because I believe that one of the biggest issues in our community right now is that people tend to be in their own silos. And by silos, I mean, like, you may have a particular viewpoint, or you may belong to a particular, like, different group or whatever, and you rather believe in that, and you want to support somebody who's in part of that own silo. So I think, as a member of parliament, I think there are certain issues that you need to talk about, that you need to actually come out and talk about why you're supporting it or why you're against that. And I think those are certain aspects where I think the youth might see some loss of credibility, because a lot of times when you tune into the Tibetan Parliament session, a lot of times it does seem very personal. It's very personal attacks against each other, and I'm saying this from a lot of them are doing that. So I think that is a challenge and it's an issue. However, as I said earlier, I think there are some structural issues that need to be addressed so that we can have more productive members of parliament.
More engagement.
More engagement,
Yeah.
and, like, more resources that's allocated to them, so that they can engage the community better, so they can engage with their voters. I think that needs to be improved.
Thank you. Sumtopkela, do you think there's a gap? Like,
I don't think there's any criminal in the parliament. But I don't know exactly about, like, what kind of credibility you're referring to. But there's a
credibility in regards to what you do outside, not when you were not an MP, and also when you associate with different NGOs.
Parliamentarian is actually the lawmaker. The important thing is they are the people who actually manage the like the state affair, or they, like, check and balance the power. Like we have seen is, like the manipulation in the parliament. Like
what kind of manipulation?
You see, like I don't want to come to that specific, because it's. But what I have seen is, the executive, like, committee will bring a new law, and then the parliament is supposed to like check the misuse and use of the power, like, or be it other institution, and we have seen plenty. Like the thing is, problem is their primary task is like to bring the like the check of power, check and balance, to perform the check and balance and manage the state affairs that orient to more like promotion of just society or better society. That is absent. They, most of the parliamentarians tend to like promote themselves as most faithful and loyal, and that, in that way the people's like the they like politicians are good at like using the fears of people politicians are good at, it's kind of, Machiavelli art, like art of lying. They're good. I'm not referring specific to one person, but generally, like the politics that we have seen is more about, like power, contestation of power, and power in negative sense, not in the positive sense of bringing changes or orienting, like really, like how you are going to connect to the people. It's not about that. And mainly are like most of the day use the fear in the people. Oh, His Holiness, the city, all they should be respected. The people who are not respected full enough, and they are like detective, like there are these people, like the way he see it, like there's a possibility that he will, harm, or so they use the, and that kind of logic, and then promote the kind of, demagogic kind of logic, and then they get manipulate the people's fear. Like we are seeing is His Holiness is aging at this time. Now the new thing is, okay, now we are seeing is more challenging time ahead of us. Okay, let's like unite, let's, like, and then what we are missing is actually democracy is all about having different view, like, and respecting them and listening to them and reasoning to them. We are not promoting that. We are kind of promoting, like, provoking the fear and using it to, like, attack against the other people who doesn't agree with you or have different view, and we have seen it plenty now. That's why I mean, see, I when I talk about accountability, we're seeing is the leadership is actually not effective, and now like it's not about accountability, but there's a change. There's need of change of like whole way that we see, like a whole way to understand the politics and the politics and the power,
Mm-hmm. Sure. Anything to add on this? No.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. My last, before we wrap up the interview, my last question to you is about the Exile Tibetan community's unity. Over the last few years, our community's unity has been affected by infighting, particularly along the lines of political stance, regionalism, and other divisive lines. I think you'll all agree that this is clearly a problem. If elected, Lobsang, how will you address those issues?
Okay. So I think, let me very clearly state that, I think this is also a good point. Like, personally, okay. Sorry, do you mind repeating the question?
Sure. Over the last few years, our exile community's unity has been affected by infighting and along the lines of regionalism, political stance, and other divisive lines. What do you think?
Yes. So I think that is a reality, and I think this is something that I've seen happen in the last 10 years. And so personally, I think I just want to talk a bit about myself in this regard, because I usually don't like boxes or labels. So for example, like one of the things is like the label that you're talking about is like, are you a progressive, are you a liberal, are you a conservative in the global sense, or are you a global citizen, or are you a Rangsen, are you a Umilam person? So these are all these labels, right? And I personally don't like labels, and that is something that, because I feel that sometimes labels really box you in to a certain aspect of it. And just to give you an example, right, I might be a progressive when it comes to like gender rights. However, I'm probably conservative when it comes to Tibetan culture. So that itself doesn't mean, what does that mean? Am I a progressive or am I a liberal? So I think, or a conservative, right? So I think human beings are very complex, and I think labeling is something that I don't really enjoy. So for example, like I believe that, for example, now if you want to talk about the ideology issue, right, Rangsen and Umilam. Rangsen is our birthright, and I think we should strive for it. How, at the same time, Umilam is a policy that was proposed by the CTA, and it was adopted through a public referendum. And I don't really see a difference. I don't see a contradiction between these two spaces. And I think that, and one doesn't really have to choose. And I think that asking people to choose is an issue. So for example, like the work that I do, we work as an organization, we work with a lot of different people, a lot of different organizations who have different political views, and all of them work for Tibet. And I think that is where I think it's about getting together, it's about taking away your labels, and I think that's something that we need to do. And one, like a final thing that I think is just say, like kind of like, if you do want to have a label, I think the label is, I'm a Tibetan. And this was the what do you call it, the cry from in recent times. This was the cry from Tibet in 2008. It was Nga Pyo Bai. That was the cry from Tibet. It was not about divisions. It was about one oneness. So I think that is something that we need to take forward. I think creating too many labels and saying like, what do you stand for, what are you, I think that creates more divisions. And as long as I think people are working for Tibet, doesn't really matter what label you want to attribute yourself, because as long as you can see that they're doing something for the cause of Tibet, I think that's fine.
Right. Gesang?
Yeah, I don't exactly agree that, you shouldn't define who you are. Like, I think that's absolutely fine. But the problem arises when, like, you have a problem with another person identifying as who they are. I feel that's the issue. And like this word unity has been, Choekyi, right, has been misinterpreted, and like, maybe sometimes, like, unintentionally, and maybe sometimes, like, intentionally, it has been misinterpreted as meaning like, everybody being the same. Like, you have to think the same, you have to speak in the same way, you have to dress in the same way to be defined as Tibetan. And it's actually quite sad that, like, in the last 60 years, like, because of our, like, situation, like, we have come into exile, like, cut off from our, like, the ancestral lands, and like, many of the youth these days, like including myself, like, we don't really have a good proper knowledge of like our the language that our grandmothers and grandfathers used to speak, right? And it's quite sad, but like, why should we, like, why should we fight amongst ourselves, like, when the situation has already, like, become so, like, horrible for all of us, right? I don't have a problem with, like, people identifying or, like, supporting, like, any ideology, like, as long as, like, as Lobsang La said, like, as long as you are a Tibetan, as long as, like, you are working for Tibet, like, and I think, like, we have that in all of us, like, all of us want to see a free Tibet. All of us want to, like, go back to Tibet and, like, see that our brothers and sisters back in Tibet, like, they don't have to suffer anymore. All of us want that. So if we keep ourselves busy with these, honestly, like, these are really trivial things, I feel. When you consider it at the larger stage, like, are we more important than, like, the people who are living inside Tibet? I don't think so. Like, at least for me, definitely not. They are definitely more important. So, like, why should I spend my time, like, fighting with another person about, like, our differences? I don't want to do that, and, like, I don't want to see a community, like, that does that. Like, we should not be violent towards each other. We should not, like, fight amongst ourselves, like, based on any difference, I think, like. And those are the kind of, like, democratic values, and, like, those are the kind of, like, Buddhist values, honestly, that I want to see.
Okay, thank you. Santopkela.
There's a general misconception where there's a competing kind of ideology and preference and view. It's viewed as conflict, it's not conflict. And unity is not same as, like, oneness, like everyone should be same color, same, like, if there's a garden, all the flowers should be same. That's not, Democracy is all about that difference being, like, how you're going to preserve that garden or that community as a whole with a shared commonality of whatever it is. But then, like, having different view and debating it, it's different. But then problem is when one kind of, like, dominant group then exert the control over the other, and other are characterized or like categorized as like, if they rise the issue. We know now in India, like, you look at BJP, like, if there's they are the majority party, like, and they decide everything, and then, like, project others, like, we all know this. That is what I think it's important. It's important to have different view, debates, and all this, rather than, like, projecting other, having, different views. Absolutely fine, and we should not misunderstand that, okay, these all political conflicts are, like, creating disunity, and this fear is not true, like, because we are not able to understand that all the community have the, like, that kind of conflict, and they persist through that, and they also have their sense of commonality, and the kind of, like, and in our case, like, as Lobsang said, like, we all can be more united in the sense if we really work toward promoting the like Tibetan issue, like without like falling to the traps of like others like wrong and should be avoided. Like no society should be one group of people and opinion and political class or ideology. Society will thrive if there's a diversity and if there's pluralism, and then the whole people get and especially marginalized or the minority should not, if Rangzin is now minority, they should not be disrespected and categorized as like what we are seeing now. And I know this personally, and that's why we need change in the way we see the politics. That's why I was talking from the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you.
So yeah, I think one thing I just want to add, because I think from a perspective as when Kesa mentioned about labels, right? I think what I really want to be clear about the fact is that I'm not saying that people shouldn't subscribe to any particular viewpoint. That's your right. However, I think one of the challenges that's happening, and I don't think it's only in our community, it's a global phenomena, is about it's about being in your own silos, and that is something that social media is also promoting. And I think we need to look at how it's kind of going down a rabbit hole. For example, once you kind of be a part of an echo chamber, where it's your views are always being kind of put in one space, and you are kind of getting back that same view. You think this is the right view. There's no other view. So that's when I mean that's a personal choice that I don't really like labels. But at the same time, I think this is a danger that we really need to figure out right now, because I think this is what has happened in the community a bit. There are a lot of echo chambers. And as ST said, I think we need debates. Because a healthy democratic society without debates cannot function, because everyone's going to be in their own silos. And for example, I think one example I just wanted to give was how I think if people have time, they should watch something like the Intelligence Squared, IQ Squared, which is a UK-based platform for debate. And they debate on most of the controversial topics that are happening in the current world. And they have people from both sides having a debate. Intelligent debate, structured debate, where you respect each other's views and have a debate. And then people can decide what they want to decide on. But it doesn't mean that you are basically going to say that that person is wrong and you are right. It's about your own viewpoints. So I think that's where I was talking about, where we shouldn't really be stuck with labels sometimes, because when you tend to stick with labels, you tend to get into silos. And I think that's something that we are seeing in the community, to be very honest.
Thank you, Lobsangla. Any last remarks from you? No? Thank you so much for your time. We wish you successful campaigns ahead. Thank you.